All right, so hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Artist, presented by KASMA Records. Now, this is Seth, your host, and I'm very honored today to be speaking with an author, father, Christian, entrepreneur, role model, fellow musician, and true warrior of life who has fought his way through immense personal challenges to get to where he is today. I'm speaking to C-Ray Stanziola, the author of Life of an Immigrant, The Journey to America for C-Ray Stanziola. And C-Ray is also the founder of the I Am Latino movement. So welcome, C-Ray. It's good to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Seth. Appreciate it.
So, C-Ray, for the folks that have not been familiarized with your story and your background, for the people who have perhaps not yet read your book or have not listened to the audiobook from Amazon and Audible, so just briefly, in the brief summary, because we'll go into some pretty deep details later on in this call, what is your story? Who is C-Ray Stanziola? And you can start by telling your story from where you were born and in what time you were born, what conditions were there. So go ahead and tell us a bit more about yourself to give us a background.
Well, I was actually born in Panama, Central America, right where the Panama Canal is. I was born in a border town from Costa Rica called Chiriquí, David City, where I was born. And I'm from Italian descent. So growing up, my parents, all I knew was they were always working. Mom was the one that took care of us to go to school. That was already. And I knew a little bit about my dad and my grandpa and what they were doing, helping Noriega at the time, since my grandfather was Noriega's, councilman. But growing up in Panama, things were really, really easy. We were all good students. We didn't get into trouble. I was probably the most rebellious out of all because I always wanted to do something that my parents didn't want me to do. Jump the fence and go play soccer in the front of the house. My dad comes around and I see him. I jump the fence back. He sees me and then he spanks me when I got home. Those kinds of normal things. A little bit of I sometimes get in trouble for no reason. But my life was pretty normal until this situation with the invasion happened back in 1989 in December. So my parents decided to move to the States. And, like I said, growing up, I'm the oldest of four. I have a sister who is about 37 right now. My little brother is 34. And my brother that follows me is about 41, 42. So, parents always, they weren't believers. They love God, but they were just hardworking people that try to support their children. We saw mom more often than we saw dad, because dad was always working. But growing up, my life was really, I want to say, now that I've been in the States for so many years, over close to 30 years, I learned that, I learned a lot in my country about life outside of the city. In other words, my father taught me things that people that grow up in the city normally don't learn, like hunting and fishing, and, taught me not to be afraid of animals and, how to slaughter a cow. I know that's not something that we see on a regular basis, eat chicken from the patio, things like that, stuff that, you don't see all the time. And so a lot of that made me really kind of aware and open my mind to another world, which is the nature, appreciating nature, sitting under the tree and grabbing a mango, type of thing. So a lot of that, I'm very grateful for my father teaching me a lot of these things that helped me, become who I am today as well. So, but life
and sorry to interrupt, C-Ray. But at the time when you grew up in Panama, who was the leader of Panama?
At the time was, Noriega was the general, because the country was based on the military. But we had a president, however, but the one who really ran the country was Noriega. He was the one that really called the shots and things like that. So he was a general. When I met him, he was only a captain. So I was very, very young. I was probably maybe 8 or something like that. And I would travel with my father that would take my grandfather to see him in the capital of Panama, which is 6 hours away from where we were from. And I would sit in the living room and kind of sort of, they get me busy playing with whatever they had in there at the time. I couldn't remember very clearly, but my grandfather would go into a room, closed doors, and then we wouldn't know what they would discuss there. But he then became a general, and so that's also. So I've met Noriega even when he was a captain. So it was many years before the invasion happened.
Right. And I recall, like, reading over your book, your family had a very special relationship with the general. Isn't that right?
They did, and it was based on my grandfather's relationship with him. So the way that really went is my grandfather. I don't remember exactly how they met, and I guess I never really asked my father how they met. However, my grandfather apparently, and according to my father, because my grandfather passed away a few years ago, he was in some kind of cult, and in the cult, he was very spiritual. And Noriega used my grandfather for advice on how to accomplish certain things. And one of them was my grandfather predicted that Noriega, when he was a captain, would become a general if he did certain things. And that prediction became true down the line. And Noriega became more assertive and more confident on my grandfather's counsel because of those kinds of predictions. And I'm only mentioning one of probably many because I don't know the rest of them. But and then that convinced Noriega even more to believe everything that my grandfather would say. And that's why he became sort of his personal counselor. Nothing to do with his military experience or military anything. It was more in the personal level. When he needed if he was to make a really tough decision on anything that had to do with his, ruling over Panama, then he would call my grandfather, have him come over, and then discuss those matters. And then he would then give him his spiritual advice. And then Noriega, for the most part, would do what he said.
Right. So, and again, like you mentioned that in the book that this spiritual movement also had organization, right? I believe there was a temple of sorts or some kind of office or headquarters in Los Angeles.
Yes. So the way I found that out, I did a little bit of research, and I don't know how to pronounce it in English because I only knew it in Spanish, but it had to do with a cult that it's kind of sort of like the Masons type of thing. They have certain ranks. And my grandfather was a very high level ranked in that particular cult. And one of the things that he did is took the prayers in Noriega when he was a captain to become a general all the way to their temple in Los Angeles, which I don't know if it still remains because I'm talking many years ago. I mean, well, close to 35 years ago. But yes, they did have hubs in different places, and my grandfather was ranked quite high for his level in that particular cult. So,
right. And, I know that going through your book, I mean, you have had like almost every chapter of your book, I noticed there was some kind of major challenge that you experienced, yet through belief in yourself and also belief in your faith in God and the support of your family, you somehow got through some enormous catastrophes that would have crushed others. And I'm wondering, like, what is your opinion on this behind referring to the success of Noriega and moving up the ranks and having so much influence and power that he eventually acquired? Do you think that Noriega's quick ascent to power was more from some mystical powers granted to him by, the Latino Freemasons, or was your grandfather's belief in him and the encouragement and the motivation and the inspiration so much that he believed in success and he could not even think of failure as an option? So you've heard of the power of attraction and the beliefs of self-affirmations, where some people can even believe that a tumor will go away, and they do. So what do you think is kind of more behind this success, if you can call it that, of Noriega in the early years? Was it more driven by this cult, so you say, or more driven by inspiration and self-esteem and self-confidence that your grandfather helped him acquire?
Well, I think it's a combination of two, but primarily I believe it had to do with the belief and the cult, and then what my grandfather was encouraging to. Because I didn't understand these things until I became a believer and understood the spiritual realm to an extent, and I would have probably given you a completely different opinion about this same question years before if I didn't know what I know now about the spiritual realm. But to be quite honest, I do believe that, primarily the belief on what my grandfather was doing, and that spiritual powers setting things up in the spiritual realm for him to become what he became. So I do believe that there was some of that involved. And then I think as he was growing, his own confidence grew because of the successes that were happening. But I think he was already a person who was confident enough to take over what he took over. I mean, he was convinced that he could do certain things. So that came all from him. But the success that he had in the ranking changes and the predictions that my grandfather made for him to become what he became gave him the affirmations that whatever my grandfather was teaching him or doing was the way to go, as opposed to him trying to be just a very confident person in what he was trying to do. So I do believe that this is more a spiritual thing than a personal confidence type of thing.
Gotcha. And so moving on, you mentioned in your book that your family had quite a comfortable position under Noriega at the time. And it was because that your family, and again, not only your family, it was a large amount of Panamanians, groups, families, institutions who were aligned with the Noriega government. And that kind of came to a crashing halt when Noriega lost his favor with the U.S. Can you kind of talk a bit about that? What kind of interrupted your life in Panama? What was the triggering point?
Of course, I didn't know all the details of what Noriega was doing as a young guy, but my grandfather, though he was a very strong influence in Noriega's life, was a very humble person. And I think it had to do a lot with his own persona, his own character. He was just a very simple, humble person. So Noriega did offer him many times, opportunities for him to make lots of money. And he declined those offers because he kept himself with lots of integrity as a spiritual counselor for Noriega. However, Noriega, because of my grandfather's influence, was able to help my parents have really good jobs. My mother she actually, instead of having to work her way up, got a job as one of the regional, DMV. So the driving, where you get your license and stuff for the whole state. And then my father was, also for the whole state, the guy who handled all the sports in the state. And so the director of all sports in the state. So they had really good positions, very stable jobs, because Noriega opened the doors for them to get those jobs with just a phone call away. My father also loved, the outdoors, loved the, farming and raising cattle and stuff. So he also got the hookup with Noriega to get funding or financing on 2 farms that had 800 plus acres, and another one had even more than that. And he would raise cattle there and pigs and all kinds of different things. And that was because Noriega allowed him to get the funding or the financing through one of the national banks in the country, and he was able to do those things. So yeah, the influence of my grandfather in Noriega's life helped my parents have some type of stability for us. Of course, we never knew this until later on, where we had to figure a way to get out of the country because of all that happened with the invasion. But there was a lot of influence on my parents, prosperity and success in their jobs because of Noriega. Yes.
Right. And I read further on that what kind of caused the trigger for your immigration to the United States, what caused a lot of the concern and the violence in Panama around your family, was that the United States, who once had a friendly relationship with Noriega, they eventually turned against him, right?
They did, yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
they
believe
did.
and now, and again, I'm not saying Noriega was an angel, but what triggered the invasion was a combination, I believe, of business interests, money, and politics. Because when Noriega pretty much told the U.S. to go pound sand with regards to the canal, isn't that what triggered the actual military action?
Yeah, actually, Noriega. So they wanted to extend and have Noriega kind of give the power over to them for the canal. And Noriega said the canal is the Panamanians, and it will be led by the Panamanians. So they didn't like that, and so obviously it took him a couple of years. According to my father, it took him a couple of years. I think it was about 3 years before they actually came back and did the invasion. But the first thing they did, according to what the information that I gathered, was they tried to diminish and tarnish his reputation. Now we know that Noriega wasn't an angel, obviously, right? And he did help the people of Panama. I mean, he did help, just like cartel people do. They go and build houses and help. I mean, somehow, some way, they help the community. But Noriega did help his people. Well, the problem that we believe was Noriega had a relationship with the CIA, with Interpol. I believe that they worked together in somehow, some way. But when Noriega stood for his country, then they weren't very happy with that, and so they started, kind of sort of giving him a bad press and deteriorating his image. And then 3 years later, they came in and invaded. Now, the invasion had a very particular purpose. I don't remember anything, any of us being warned about an invasion happening. So I'm playing out in the front, and all of a sudden we hear bombs hitting the airport, which was probably a few minutes away from my house. The earth shaking. We don't know what's going on. We were told by my father that every time the earth was shaking, that we got to get under a table so we can protect ourselves, because and so we get under a table, scared. We don't know what's going on, and then all of a sudden we peek out the window and see a bunch of Humvees with Marines coming into our neighborhood, because there's 2 lieutenant colonels that lived on the same street, 2 houses away from mine, and within 5 minutes they surrounded the house and took out both of them in wife beaters and handcuffs and took him in. I don't know where they went. I don't know what they did with him or anything like that. But whoa, sorry about that.
No problem.
Sorry about that, Seth.
No problem. It sounds like C-Ray's Pooch wanted to add something to the interview.
Yeah. So
as you were saying about the Humvees rolling up on your street, that must have been freaky for a 12-year-old.
Well, yes, it was. First and foremost, I mean, we've never seen action like that. I mean, this is kind of like watching, Black Hawk Down, and you got the Humvees unloading a bunch of Marines, and then, I mean, I'm talking in less than 5 minutes, they surrounded the house and got everybody that was supposed to be, and then we're looking, and everybody's out. We just don't know what's happening. I mean, there's true chaos. Now, I mean, whatever the purposes, whatever the reasons they had, in my opinion, there was no need for that many casualties. But I guess sometimes, when you're fighting for power, that's the repercussions of wanting to gain power. So, but it was a very traumatic situation to my parents. Obviously, the whole city, the whole state, the whole country was in chaos. Everybody's asking questions, what's going on? My parents are calling. We, at the time, didn't have cell phones, obviously, right? So, calling the landline, and sometimes we're hiding. We don't hear the phone. I'm pretty sure my parents were panicking, and everybody was it was just going crazy. Something very traumatic for someone who was around 12 to 14 years old.
Right. And, it seemed like, again, the invasion was also a trigger for real concern and risk, not only for your family, but for others who are, again, with the Noriega government, because, the opposition government, I guess the rebels, if you were to call them, they would be in a position to retaliate, right, politically against supporters and affiliates of Noriega. So was that a very real concern for you, your dad, your grandpa?
Well, the only thing that I remember in regards to that was that, some departments of the military in different parts of the country took matters into their own hands and wanted to attack back. And there were a lot of casualties, that didn't have to happen for them taking a stand without any, permission from their superiors. Noriega never put his people in danger. In other words, Noriega never told them to go ahead and fight back because we knew that we were overpowered by the U.S. So he wasn't going to put his people at risk. But some people of ranking in certain different areas of the country decided to fight back, and that's why there were more casualties than we really wanted to have. Now, of course, the bombing and all that, I mean, we didn't think that was necessary. And I guess, in my opinion, they were probably trying to test different weapons with us. But net, it was some retaliation from the military, the Panamanian military, towards the U.S. And also there were some military people that turned against Noriega and wanted to turn him in. So there was some of that as well. Whenever the people found out that was...
Oh, something happened. Are you okay, buddy?
Yeah, I'm fine. So whenever, something happened. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Whenever that happened, obviously there was more casualties, and he knew that people who turned against him. He knew that. Not everybody was because people found an opportunity to turn against him now that they have support from the American military as well.
Right.
So, but he never gave the order to have his people in jeopardy to fight against a very much more powerful enemy, which was US.
And looking at your book, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but just looking over your book right here, the decision was made in your family, at least, that it was no longer going to be safe to stay in Panama, thus the initial move to the U.S. Is that right?
Yeah. One of the things that I have to say, and I want to make sure that this is said loud and clear, I've always tried to be fair and not go by what I hear, but like to always get the facts so I can make my own judgment, but I'm very grateful for the U.S. and the opportunity that he offered me to be here. My son now, and I might get ahead a little bit, but my son now serves in the Marines as a Marine.
Right.
And so I'm very grateful for what this country has offered me. This is the land of opportunities. This is where my children were born. This is where I fed my family. This is where my parents fed us. And this is the country that's given us opportunities, and I forever be grateful. And I have nothing but good things to say about America for giving me all the opportunities to see my family grow and to prosper in this land. Whatever they do, and with foreign countries and how they work it, it's a lot of different things I don't agree with. At the same time, obviously, because I think most of us don't agree to certain things they do. But I like to read those kinds of...
Well, as they say, though, to be American is to disagree, right?
Right. Yeah. So for me, I really try, Seth, to leave those kinds of topics a little farther than I want them to be, farther than I wanted to have them closer to me, because those topics can take us somewhere to discussions that will get people a little hot-headed or a little bit, heated up. And, honestly, I'm just a grateful person for being in America, man. It's a great place to be. Like I said, I'm always going to agree with what they do, but I'm definitely very grateful to be here. And there is some amazing things that this country has done for us, especially, giving us an opportunity to see our generations, grow in this country and take advantage of all the benefits that this country has to offer.
Right. Fair enough. No, I completely agree with you. And as mentioned before, I think that the United States, I'm a patriot to the core. And my point actually in mentioning that, though, was that it was the trigger that got you into the United States, actually, the first time, was this action, right, that involved Noriega. So when you arrived in the United States, you were 12 years old and did not speak English. Right?
Yeah, the reason why
that must have been tough.
And the reason why it was because when this thing went down, the opposite party, once Noriega was captured, the opposite party took over, and they started firing and going after everyone that supported Noriega, whether they had anything to do or nothing to do. If they were supporters of Noriega, they went after everybody. So they were obviously went after my grandfather. They went after my parents, and my parents lost their jobs and things like that. So things became very complicated for my parents. And my mother had a sister, her middle sister, that lived in Atlanta, Georgia. And they have been living there for a few years. And she called her and asked her if they had an opportunity for my father to work. And then they had got him an opportunity. And my father decided to go first. And but there was persecution. There was persecution. There was pressure being put on my family's life. And that was one of the reasons why we fled to Atlanta and landed in Miami in December 24th, 1989. And we were, a few days later in Atlanta, Georgia, and Sandy Springs areas where we moved to, back in 1990. So,
right, gotcha. And I guess that's kind of where the story, at least in my opinion, reading your book, that's kind of where the story started to take off for me. That's kind of where the things started getting juicy. When you were 12 years old and you were in Georgia, and then later on you moved to Texas, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that transition?
Yeah, living in Georgia was a very, very special experience because we always wanted to come to America. We've always thought about like high-rise buildings and blonde girls with blue eyes. We don't see that often over there. So it was always in our plans to come to America and really live that dream of the high-rise buildings and clean streets and all that. And when we were there, it was kind of like a dream come true. Now, of course, one of the things that we never thought was the challenges that came along with that, right? We enjoy the scenery. We enjoy like everything that this country had to offer us. But then the challenges began to happen when I started going to school, but I didn't know how to speak English, but I was too old to be in 5th grade or 4th grade. But at the same time, I had to be in 5th grade to learn how to speak. And then, knowing that my father was the only provider in the home, and that he had to feed 4 children and a wife, it was very unpredictable how tomorrow was going to be. Are we going to have a full meal, or are we going to share the same things? Or is any of us are going to stay hungry, type of thing. But, my parents managed to do everything they could. Very grateful for that. And the experience in Atlanta was really, really awesome to an extent. We got to experience for the first time snow, which was kind of cool too, and make a snowman and things like that. We're talking, this is, early 90s. So, one of the challenges that I lived in Atlanta, it was that we were like 6% Hispanic in the school. So there was a lot of people that were prejudiced against us and things like that. I was very talented in sports and surpassed a lot of other athletes in the school. And, I would have people get upset and talk. Most of the time, I didn't understand what they were saying anyways. So I guess to an extent, it didn't really get to me because I didn't understand it. But there was an incident that happened at the gym one time after we played dodgeball, that this black kid, there was a group of kids that surrounded me, made a circle, and then threw this real skinny black kid in the middle of the circle and encouraged him to fight me. I had no idea why. Only thing I can think of, they were jealous because I was a better runner than they were. But, whatever the reason was, I tried to avoid fighting because of a lot of reasons. Number one, I'm undocumented. Number two, I'm in a completely new place, and all I want to do is do the right thing. I'm not here to provoke anybody or anything. And so I didn't know how to react. And it wasn't until this kid swung at me a few times that I looked over and I looked at my PE teacher in Anglo, and he didn't do anything. And he saw me in the middle of the circle. And I was like, okay. And so this kid kept swinging at me, and I couldn't get out of the circle. I mean, there was probably a total of 15 kids around, and I finally had to defend myself, and I swung and I hit him in the jaw, and the kid fell, started crying. And then the PE teacher came and grabbed me and took me to the principal's office and expelled me from school. So,
Oh.
those kinds of things, then I got moved from 5th grade to 8th grade. And even though I got jumped around like that, I was a pretty good student, but it was very challenging to do math because jumping around from grades, you got to kind of follow a sequence when you do math. And I jumped around so much. I always felt like I wasn't really smart in math because I was jumped around so much. But in middle school, I had an experience where I was trying to go to this soda machine, and I wanted to get a soda. And in Georgia, they had one kind of like the Mountain Dew, but it's called Yellow Mellow.
Okay.
And I went to the soda machine. What's that?
I remember it.
Yeah, I went to the soda machine, and I asked. There was this really, really cute girl with braces. I always love girls with braces. I don't know why. This little blonde girl with blue eyes, and she had braces, and I had a crush on this girl, right? So she's making lines, so I decided to buy a soda because she was there. And well, that was a mistake, because if I was trying to impress her, that didn't work out. That backfired on me. But I asked, can I have a Jello Mellow? Because the Y in Spanish is pronounced like the J. So I say Jello Mellow, and I just remember it was like 4 people there making line. And I just remember everybody busting laughing. And I don't know if humans can turn different colors, but I probably turned like, I don't know how many colors, because I was so embarrassed. And, as a young 14-year-old, bullying wasn't a big thing back in the days. So never really got bullied, but I really felt really, really bad when they laughed at me. And then I came back home and told my mother, I don't want to go back to school again. And then she came to me and told me, son, one day you'll be bilingual. You'll have a lot of opportunities. And one day this is going to pay off for you. Don't quit now. I remember I was at a football game, and I was a loner because I didn't know how to speak English. I wasn't Mr. Popular. I wasn't cool. And so I was just hanging out pretty much by myself. And I remember that day I was just thinking, what am I doing here? Why do I have to go through all this struggle? Why do I have to go to all these people making fun of me and things like that? Why? And that was probably the first time I ever felt like I wanted to go back home.
Oh, back to Panama.
Yeah, I was like, I want to go back to the struggle there too, but I'd rather struggle there and speak my language,
Right. Yeah, but I think at the end, your mom was right. And going further on, I think this was just one of the beginning of many challenges that you would face as a youngster, and as a young man. And again, what really got me inspired was that you're thrown into just terrible situations, and yet still, with perseverance and belief and with grit, you pulled yourself out of every single hole. So with that point made, I want to transition into talking about your book, currently for sale on Amazon, and also the audiobook version is available on Audible, and it's called Life of an Immigrant. And today, looking at the sales figures, your book is currently at number 393 within Hispanic and Latino biographies, and I think that's quite good. It's a quite good ranking, despite it being fairly new to the market. So, wanted to congratulate you on that. And it is a new release. It's only been out for, I believe, about a month, if not less. So I think there's plenty of time for this ranking to significantly go up. But for now, I want to congratulate you. This is a very impressive ranking, being that your book is competing against thousands of others across the planet.
Wow, that's great.
So for those who don't know, I was the narrator of your audiobook version of your story. Right. And my company, KASMA Records, we produced your audiobook as well. And as we discussed before the interview, I think the main reason why it kept me hooked after the first few pages, despite me, obviously, I'm not an immigrant, but of course my grandfathers were. It's typical American story. But I was engaged because, it wasn't just an immigrant story about just someone new coming to America. For me, it was so much more than that. It was a story about a man who fought through hell at a chance to have a normal life and a family. And it was a truly inspiring read. You mentioned that you came to the US very young, not knowing any English, and you described some challenges where there was some bullying going on, not fitting in, being a loner in school. But there are a few moments in the book that I highlighted, C-Ray. And the reason why I highlighted them for myself was because, these moments really stood out for me as things you went through and things that I also went through in some variation. And also perhaps many other people out there who would listen to your audiobook or read your story would definitely say, hey, you know what? I've been there and I can't believe I was there and somehow I made it through and C-Ray made it through. Or even they could be thinking, I'm going through this right now and I'm thinking about throwing in the towel, but reading about how C-Ray just fought through thick and thin, I might be have a few ideas and be inspired to resolve it in my life. So I wanted to jump to chapter 5, which is called Corporate Life and Living the Lie. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is regarding, there's a moment in chapter 5 where you're at a bar. Okay. And of course, my dad being kind of old school, and also as a side note, reading your story, your dad kind of reminds me of my dad. They both seem to think very much the same way in many things, family first and conservative in many ways. And even when we were younger, they gave us a bit of tough love that eventually paid off. And my dad told me something when I was young, okay, and when I was old enough to drink, when I was in college. And my father told me, he said, Seth, take it from me, nothing ever good happens after 10 p.m. at night at a bar.
I would agree with him.
Right.
Sure.
Right. So in chapter 5, you're at a bar, and there was an incident where there's a girl coming out of the bar, and there's some flirting going on, and she asks, I believe she asks, hey, like, do you have my number or something? And I don't know. Do you remember this story? She's coming out of the bar. Yeah, and it has to do. She's like, yeah, she's coming out of the bar, and then you two have a conversation, and then it leads to some. Well, shall we say, the PG-13, for the PG-13 crowd out there, it leads to a romantic meeting. Okay, let's just say that. An intimate moment, yeah. All right? Now, later on, it causes some issues, okay? Because you left your ID, right, with this woman in her car.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But then, my jaw dropped when I was reading this story. My jaw dropped, and I was like, because when you later wrote, you said just coincidentally, this woman worked at the same place my wife did at the time, and I was like, are you effing kidding me? Seriously? Yeah. Oh, just by coincidence, right? And then you have to pursue her at your wife's workplace to get the ID back. Okay.
Yes.
Right. And and again, for those that want more context about that story, again, it gets deeper than that, but people should really pick up the book or get the audiobook, because this story is extremely entertaining. It's a little bit dark, and it is a little bit dark. There's some dark humor, in this book. But later on, after you have this intimate encounter with a woman from the bar in her car, shall we say, and then you lose your ID in her car, then you need to fetch it at your wife's office. You had a quote, okay, that I want to read in the interview, because I highlighted this, and this really spoke to me. And it also, I showed a few friends this quote that you wrote, and it really spoke to them as well, about relationships and about learning about relationships, right? Okay. And you wrote, and I quote, "Sometimes in life, we get used to the people or person we are with and confuse love with being used to someone. I now know love is much deeper than a feeling or a good moment or being with a very nice person. It is a decision we make to love someone regardless of what changes. In my 9 years of marriage with Kathy, I never thought I wouldn't be able to answer this obvious question." And this refers to a question she asked you about testing your love for her.
Right.
And then you go on to say, and I quote, "This is what many relationships deal with today. Love isn't unconditional anymore. There is always something that gives us enough of a reason to look for the easy way out, sometimes without noticing the casualties left along the way."
Yep.
And I think it is very easy, in life, where you're with someone for so long, and is it you're thinking, is it really love, or is it more of companionship, or are you just used to them and you're not comfortable about the idea of not being with them? Yet, is that really love? So can you, but on your quote, can you kind of talk about that moment in your life where you had that realization that, you said sometimes in life we just get used to people, and sometimes we confuse love with just being used to someone.
We are creatures of habit, Seth, and we will do the same things over and over if we're used to doing them. And it's no different in relationships. Now, I don't consider myself a Dr. Phil or an expert in relationships, but I do have experience in them, and I've learned from my mistakes. And that's one thing that I tell my children is that I paid the dues. I made the mistakes for you if you listen to my advice. But in regards to that quote, I had an experience with Catherine after that incident where, closing time, and I met this person that I didn't know who she was. And I ended up having to explain to my wife at the time, Catherine, why things happened the way they did. I was looking for a better outcome when I opened up to her, but I can understand she was hurt, and I can understand, why she went to my parents' house and stayed with him, for 30 days. But during that time, there was a lot of thinking. And so I want to go back a little bit in regards to why people do what they do. See, a lot of us are influenced. The Bible says that the children are the image of the parents. When you don't have a parent to have an image of a positive image of, then the world or whatever the surroundings you have will mold you to who you become. Some people have overcome big challenges, like people that have, a father that's a drunk, and one of their children came out to be a drunk as well, but the other one came out to be sober and never in his life wants to see an alcoholic beverage because he saw his father, drunk all the time and abusive and whatnot. So, we are the image of our parents, and that's something that's in the Bible. So the funny thing about it is sometimes we don't realize why we do what we do, and it's all based on influence, always based on influence. It's like if you're a parent, who teaches you how to be a parent? When do you go to school to be a father or mother? It's bestowed upon you, and you got to do the best you can. And what do you remember? You remember the influence your parents had in you and how they treated you. And that's your reference as to how to be a parent. So people, what they don't realize is that most of the things that we do in life are based on someone else's influence. And the reason why it's so important that you meditate on who you are is you got to sit down and study what you're doing and what works, what doesn't work, what hurts you, what doesn't hurt you, because most people know their strength, but they don't know their weaknesses. And so it's important that you focus on what your weaknesses are too, because you might be getting attacked in your weaknesses, and then you keep focusing on your strength. And what happened to me was I always was a very charming guy, and I don't say that boasting or anything like that. I just say I was always a charming guy that could talk to anybody, and I wasn't afraid. I think that a lot had to do with my previous experience as a young guy being either bullied or having to become strong if I wanted to make it. So when I wanted to quit and I told mom I want to go back home and that wasn't an option, I was forced to have to fight through that because that wasn't an option. And my only option was fight through it. So a lot of the things that I lived when I was a young guy made me who I am today, the relentless kind of guy, the guy that doesn't quit. So that's why I want people to go back and see how their childhood was. How they reacted to how the parents were towards them, or if they didn't have parents, how the grandparents or whoever was the guardian at the time, or the people around you, because they have an influence in who you are today. And sometimes we got to go back, way back, to find out why we are how we are, whether you like how you are or you don't. Now, some people accept to be how they are, even if they don't like how they react sometimes, because that's all they know. And for me, when Catherine asked me, I remember I was in the living room of our home because I was staying at her house and she had moved to my parents, and I was looking at the ceiling fan, and the ceiling fan was spinning, and then I called her and I wanted to talk to her, and I said, you need to come back home. And she said, well, why? And I said, because I love you and I want you to come home. And I'm sorry, and we need to work this out for our daughters, and she says, but you don't love me. And I said, what makes you think you don't love me? Of course I love you. He goes, if I had, breast cancer and I lost my breast or both of my breasts, will you still love me
Mm-hmm.
the same? Or if I had, third-degree burns and I didn't look as pretty anymore, will you love me the same? Or if I had, paralyzed and I could never walk again and you had to carry me all over the place, will you still love me the same? And I remember this, and I'm ashamed to say it, but it's part of my story, and I don't think this way anymore. But like you were saying earlier, it's hard to sometimes share certain things with the world because they can twist and turn things for their convenience, right? So people could turn this around and say, what an a-hole this guy is, or wow, I can't believe that this guy's such a douche, whatever the case may be. But this is the reality. This is how I thought at the time, and this is how I was, and I say was because I'm not like this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that when she told me that, I stood completely quiet, and there was a stunned silence. And she said, "See, that's what I mean. You don't love me." And that's what the call ended. So I said, and I started thinking, and I said, "How come after being married for 9 years, 8 years, I couldn't answer this question to the mother of my children, the woman I chose to be my wife?" And it wasn't like I didn't love her. So let's get that straight, because I loved her. It had to do with the meaning of what love is. See, the Bible says that my people perish for lack of understanding or lack of knowledge. So I feel that my knowledge or understanding of what love was or is wasn't the correct one. And this is why in that quote I had on my book, I say, sometimes we think that we love someone, but we're just used to that person.
Right.
Why I said that is because why would I go through the struggle of finding another girl, dating her, finding out if she's going to be nice to me, not nice to me? Does she like to wash her feet or feet stink? Does she like to brush her teeth? Does she like to shower every day? Does she doesn't shower every day? I mean, why would I want to go through all these struggles when I've already went through them with the person I'm with? And this is what people don't get it. Some people stay with whoever they're with because the kids, I don't want a divorce. I don't love him or I don't love her, but I'm still with him because my kids, I don't want my kids to be hurt because there's going to be a separation. Okay. Well, first and foremost, you're teaching your children that you should be with someone, but not because it's real love, because it's convenient, because someone else is going to be hurt. You're going to hurt them no matter what you do. The best thing you can do when you don't love somebody is teach those people who you care why things are not working out and let them know the reason why, as opposed to lie to them all across, why you're with someone, or if you just don't want to have to deal with a person that might not like to wash dishes and do all the chores in the house that they do for you, and then you might end up having to do it yourself, and then you like the fact that she doesn't. So you'll comply, you'll get through the argument, and you'll try to work it out. But then love doesn't reign, and so the kids get to see, or the children get to see, there is friction, there is argument, there is, there's not the good communication. The love reigns above all. And then, if we agree to disagree, it's okay though. We still love each other. And that's one thing I learned when she asked me those 3 questions. My love was conditional, and I wanted to find out what is unconditional love. And what unconditional love is, it's something that I would tell you right now, 99% of the people in the world probably don't know or do it. And we confuse what real love is. And if you read in, Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it talks about what real love is. Love doesn't boast, doesn't envy, forgives all things, is patient. So to be honest, if we really love somebody, we would really be patient with them. We would try to, and I'm also at fault even today with my wife, because I don't show love, unconditional love, the way I want to, though I am much better than I was before. So I'm also talking to myself as I'm giving the advice right now. But what really matters, Seth, is not how many times you fall, but how many times you're willing to get up and keep fighting.
Right.
Because
and again, I wanted to say, sorry to interrupt, C-Ray, but what I wanted to say was, You mentioned that maybe people think you're an a-hole. I mean, reading this segment of your book, I didn't think you're an asshole at all. In fact, I thought you're being painfully honest, because who out there hasn't had uncertainty about some of their relationships, right? Uncertainty or confusion or the feeling of being not certain. I even saw your words burned me in my heart, because in my past, I have had relationships where I wasn't completely certain about it. I wasn't sure about my love, or the woman wasn't sure if she really loved me. And I think it's it's part of the human condition even. And from these experiences, we do nothing but grow, and usually in a good way, right? So again, I wanted to say that no, it was very engaging, this part of your story. Now, I wanted to also ask you, in the beginning of the chapter, you said that to your first wife, Kathy, the first 7, and I quote, the first 7 years of marriage was amazing. First 7 years. Now, C-Ray, there's a saying of, the 7-year itch, where people start to have some uncertainty, or people start getting bored, or start questioning their marriage around 7 years. Do you think that actually is a thing?
No, I don't. And I will tell you, I'm glad you brought that up, because I want to make this very clear for everyone to understand what my downfall was. And I might not pretend to you, but I will give you my personal opinion about what my downfall was and what I believe things didn't go the way they should have. My parents, so in 1997, I gave my life to Christ, and I became a born-again Christian. And I began to walk in faith, and I learned a lot about the walk in faith. And a lot of the things that I did in the past were very forgotten, because I chose the path of learning more about the spiritual realm and about God and all these different things. And as I'm learning, I learned a lot about protection. God served his purpose in my life was shown when I started going to church and sharing the gospel with different people, and my life was just more peaceful, if you know what I mean. Doesn't mean that I didn't struggle with money sometimes, or I didn't have to apply for a job and I got denied, or it didn't mean that I didn't have a wreck and I had to pay a big deductible. It didn't mean that life didn't go on. It's just that he handled a certain part of my life that was never handled before. I mean, if I went through problems in life, I had some experience in certain problems in life, but I had no experience in the spiritual life. So for me, I was very passionate about it. It was very encouraging to know that there was another life that I didn't tap into, that I was learning from, and it was how the spiritual the spiritual world works. And I started learning more and more and more. So I got closer to God. When I married Kathy, I didn't touch her before we got married. I chose to wait until we finally got married to then have intimacy, because I was a man of integrity, that I wanted to do it right. And I was trying to follow the principles of the Bible, the Word of God. And I did so. And so that's why my marriage with Catherine for the first 7 years was really good, is because I kept a good connection with God. I kept God in the mix. God was number 1, number 2, number 3, and then he came my wife, and then everybody else. So because I was so spiritual in that regard, I was really trying to abide by what the Bible tells me I need to do to be blessed. I encouraged my wife to go to church with me. We attended my parents' church. I served in the ministry. I helped in the music. I was so involved with God that when I got a break and I started working for the bank, which if you're going to get to that topic, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But when I started doing things that I started seeing prosperity come, and I was separating myself, and my time was being consumed more with the things that I had to do as a man to provide for the household. And I started, missing out on spending more time with God, going to church, not have to work, not have to do this, that. And my spiritual life began to diminish. That was the beginning of my fall. So no, it wasn't a 7-year. It was just that I didn't keep that balance of my spiritual life, my personal life, my marriage life, my business life, all in order. And I went out of order, and I started, going back into the world slowly without realizing. So this tragedy wasn't something that happened overnight. This was something that evolved, and slowly I kept going more further and further away from my commitments with God and my studies and learning the Bible. And and living a spiritual life. And that was the reason why my guard was down, and then the blow came, and then I ended up losing my marriage.
Right, right. Makes sense. And again, thank you for that. And again, for those that decide to read your book or listen to the audiobook, this story is from chapter 5, which is called Corporate Life and Living the Lie. And this was one of my most favorite chapters in your book. And that's why I brought it up first, because there were just so many. I mean, again, there are moments of humor, there are moments of comedy, but at the same time, there was a huge amount of tragedy in here. And what I really liked was how you recovered from it and how you bounced back. I like the part, everyone likes a good underdog story, right? And from chapter 5, you were quickly becoming the underdog that everybody loves. So moving on, the second chapter that I wanted to bring up with you, and again, a very special quote that I highlighted. So this is from chapter 6, called Life of an Immigrant Before and After. Now, I quote, "After so much frustration and financial struggles, I knew I needed to change something. One day, I woke up and told myself, I don't want this life anymore. I lost my car, lost my house, didn't have any money. I had nothing. To top it off, everyone that I thought was cool was gone, and I was back to my own lonely life of misery. We think others are supposed to make us happy, but that will never happen unless we are happy with ourselves first. We can't give what we have never received." Now, the last part of that quote really hit me. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah.
That part of your life.
I remember I was at my house, and Catherine had moved on. We were already divorced. And I chose to just kind of sort of party and go mind my own. There was some learning that I did during the desert experience, where I was, trying to live life my way, like the sun says, right? And I stayed late, party all night, then hang out with a bunch of people. I was on a mission to just meet as many people as I could and be the coolest guy ever. A lot of that had to do with how I fell with my brother and how we grew up. I thought we were best friends, and somehow I lost him along the way. Not physically, but I mean, our relationship got very, very tarnished, and he didn't want to hang out with me anymore. And I think that really affected me emotionally, to the point where now that I was on my own, that I didn't save my marriage, that I was out partying, I wanted to meet everybody because I felt like I wanted to be everybody's friend and the cool guy, since I was never the cool guy. Obviously there was a lot of insecurities there and a self-esteem issue, obviously, right? But, it's what I did. During that time, there was a lot of things that happened, though I lost everything, that happened that I'm grateful for. Number one is I found out in the desert who I really was. See, for many years, I didn't know my potential, who I really was. And for the first time, I sang in public at a club after hours, opera, like classical music. And then I sang some stuff in the guitar. And it was the first time that I actually felt like I could be me. I loved hanging out with people. And then I found out, too, that I was a very social person. And it's something that I really missed. And I didn't know that it was in me. So being in the desert, or being, I guess, in the rebel mode after my divorce, I learned a lot about me. And I started to appreciate me, because there were some new things that came up that didn't come up before. So I'm very grateful for that. However, the consequences of my actions led me to, to lose everything. And I didn't want to accept it. I was fighting with it, because I would have these moments that were good, but they weren't moments that last forever. They were just temporary moments that made me feel like I could. But I was really on a road to destruction, for sure. Now, I've never done any drugs in my life or anything like that. But partying, staying late all night, hanging out with people was something that I felt was feeding me, but it was feeding me the wrong thing. So for me, it was very difficult to get out of that life. And one day I woke up my bed after a poker night and hosting a poker game in my house, and some guys were crashed out on the couch, and someone, wake up next to me. And then I opened my eyes and I said, it's the same thing, just a different day. I'm not getting out of this, and I'm tired of this. Just don't feel like I will never get anywhere. And I also feel, knowing that I had a spiritual background, that I understand about purpose-driven life, I said, I'm not living my purpose. So what did I do? And I don't know if I put this quote on my book. What did I do to really snap? This is the question that I asked myself that day when I woke up at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm an early bird, Seth. But I woke up at 11, 1. When I woke up, I said to myself, how do I reel things back on track? And I said, well, if I lose my purpose in life, then I will find my passion, and there lies my purpose. And that's what I did. I found my passion and I found what I love, and I went after it. And I woke up and I said, I don't want this anymore. And I went and searched for work and just getting out of this life. And slowly but surely I started, and that's when, during that time when I started working on finding, I am Latino, and that's how all that started. So that's
so. Do you think generally a lot of people get into trouble when they lack that passion and purpose in life?
Well, yeah, and it's very difficult to find it when you're okay with what you're doing or the kind of life you're living. You gotta become uncomfortable to be able to snap and begin to think what's best for you. When you're comfortable, it's just, I was just telling someone yesterday, you can dress $1 million and have a mindset of $1 and you still talk dollar. Or you can dress like $1 and have a mindset of $1 million and act like $1 million. See, I don't have to dress up for people to listen to me. I can be wearing the shorts and a cap and people will listen to me because of my mindset. Right. But if you dress, you can be a millionaire, a multi-billionaire, and still people not pay attention to you. It's about a mindset. You got to change your mindset. I had to change my mindset, and then I can change everything else around me,
Right. And again, there was a second quote in this chapter. Again, we're on chapter 6, Life of an Immigrant, Before and After. This second quote was very powerful for me and made a lot of sense. That I could definitely relate to it. But you being a man that has been through just so much in this life already, and you're not an old man. You look like quite a young guy, very fit, with many decades ahead of you to do great things.
Thank you.
You had a quote in the same chapter, and you said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it.
Yes. So I learned, so when I was a young kid, I used to fight a lot. And sometimes for the stupidest reasons, to be honest. I didn't look at me right, and I look at him back like, what's up? And then there he goes, there's a fight. I never understood why, I reacted that way. But I realized that a lot of the outcome of my decision was based on my attitude. So I chose to learn that it really is not, what happens to you. Everything that happens to you is based on how you react to it. And I knew that it was an attitude thing. And that's why I and that's a quote that a lot of people have quoted before. I didn't create the quote, but I believe it so firmly that it's 90% your attitude and only 10% what happens around you. I really do believe that, because it depends on how you're going to react to it, and I believe it. And that's what I used to get out of where I was. Why am I here? Why did I lose everything? Why do I keep borrowing money? Or why do I keep asking my mom to help me or my dad? Why can't I do these on my own? Because my attitude ain't right. And that's why I put that quote on the book.
So would you tell people who are experiencing difficulties in their lives, would you tell people that the only person who can turn your life around is you?
That's it. And here's why. Because you can be your worst enemy. And why? Because if somebody tells me, C-Ray, you're not going to make it, I have a choice. I'll say to myself, you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe that comment makes me doubt. And then I'll give up because I believe what they said. Or maybe I'll say, okay, well, you don't believe I can make it, but guess what? I believe I can, because I know what I can do, and I will show the world that I can. Steve Jobs said something very special. Before he died, he said, only the people who think they can conquer the world will. And he said, even when he was in his deathbed, he says, not even all the money I have can get me out of this bed. So it really is about the choices you make in life. Right. So honestly, I will always preach that you can be your worst enemy. For example, I didn't want to play music in public. I didn't want to sing in public because I felt I wasn't good enough. But who told me I wasn't good enough when everybody else that heard me sing said I sang good? The only person that told me I wasn't good enough to sing, and I believed them, was me in my own head, telling me I can't do it like Brian McKnight, or I can't do it like this guy. Why am I comparing myself? I'm not them. And that's why it's important people understand that they are and can be their worst enemy or their best ally. You can be your number one cheerleader and tell yourself, that's why you have to have self-motivations, your drive, to tell yourself, yes, I can and yes, I will. Why? Because no one else pays your bills. No one else is there to tell you. You got to tell yourself. That's why I put on the book, love yourself before you love anyone else. Because if you don't love you, you can't love anyone. You can't ever, give what you never received.
Right. That makes total sense. Now, we're going to move on and tackle the final chapter of the book that I highlighted. And this is chapter 7 called Finding Christ. Now, again, you have a quote here that I highlighted because I thought it was great. And again, you mentioned earlier in this interview about your bank job. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but specifically what made you a lot of money at this point in your life was corporate sales, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Corporate sales. Okay. So you were earning a salary plus, I would imagine, a huge amount of commission because you noted in your book that you were the reason why your manager went to the President's Club for the first time in his career, right?
Yeah. You
must have been making a lot of money, not only for yourself, but for the manager and the company.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting story. Of course, I'm not going to go through it, but for those listeners, pick up the book or the audio book or the hard copy, whatever you want, whatever is best, or the Kindle copy. But and you read the whole story. But basically, really, there's two parts to it. I ended up at that job because Catherine worked at a restaurant in San Antonio, and one of the waiters knew a guy that did socials and fake IDs and things like that, and so I ended up getting a job with a fake ID and a fake social, and I submitted my resume in Career Builder, and I was able to get the job. I made up some things in the resume. You do what you got to do. I'm not ashamed to say it. Most immigrants will do whatever they got to feed their family as long as it's not illegal, right? And too obvious. But I had to do it this way to be able, because I had been working, different jobs here and there that were giving me a little bit, but I wasn't making enough to sustain my family. I was a father of 2 daughters at the time, and my son that was already with his my first girlfriend, that I had a son with her. And I had a responsibility. I had to take care of my kids. So once I got this job and I submitted this, and I remember that the first day was the best day of my life. And people that want to know more, they got to read how the whole process, how I did the whole thing and all in the book. But once I got the job, I remember the first day I walk out. It was probably close to 7:15 in the evening. And my boss, Jim, goes, "So C-Ray, tell us what you're going to do for us." Because they saw my resume that I had sales experience, and I was bilingual and this and that. And so he said, "Well," I said, "Well, once I learn my products, is over." And he said, "Oh, it's over, really?" I said, "Yeah. I'll make you a lot of money, and I'll make me some money." So
I remember from that story though that I was sweating some beads reading along when you mentioned that they're asked to see your ID and social security information, right? And then you're like, and I mean, of course, it was fake. They're fake documents. And I remember reading that you're like, you offered to make a copy for them, right? Because they needed a copy of your ID and your information. And basically, you said, "Hey, I'll make a copy. I'll make a copy of my information for you." You said that so they don't have to handle the documents, right, and check them themselves. And the interviewer said, "Oh, could you please do that?" And I'm like, "Oh."
I did. And again, it's funny, Seth, because that goes back to the confidence of someone, I mean, I was so confident. I mean, I went in with a plan. I had already thought about different scenarios the moment of my interview. So one of the scenarios that I looked over and over and over was, what am I going to do when they ask me for my documents? And I had already tried to figure a way to send him a copy via email, or go ahead and make a copy myself and then get it to them, but not necessarily show him the actual document. And it worked out that way. As I entertained him, I was talking to him and I was smiling and I was very confident. And then he liked my attitude. He liked the way my demeanor. And he says, "Hey, this guy looks like he's a good salesman." So I think everything was all set up by me. I think I worked it to where I got him excited enough to want to have me come and join the team, that he didn't really feel the need to have to follow protocol. And that was just something that I thought before I got there. And then whenever I proposed for him to let me make a copy, so he didn't have to get up out of his car. "Hey, don't worry about it." I said, no, don't worry, but listen, I'll go ahead and make the copy so you don't have to get up. And he's like, "Would you do that for me?" "Yeah, no problem. Where's your printer?" "It's right over there." So I went, made the copies of it, put it back in my wallet, and handed him the copies. "I appreciate that," while he was busy doing something else. So it worked out. I'm sure that won't work out all the time if someone else had a scenario like that, but it worked out for me then. And
I got things to learn. Some things to learn, that self-belief and confidence it could be a magical moment. Where,
it can. Yeah, it can. And not only that, people will perceive it, Seth. People will know, because my daughters always tell me that you don't have to say anything, but you look intimidating, and some people have a certain appearance. They already distill certain confidence without even saying a word, or people will just look at him and say, "Well, this guy probably think he's all that in a bag of chips," right? And they don't know. And until they know that person, they'll be able to say, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that he was so nice." So I think that I do distill, or I show, confidence when I go somewhere, the way I dress and the way I carry myself. And I think that played a big role in me being able to facilitate the, making copies, as opposed to him making copies like he was supposed to.
Gotcha. And talking about the bank job, and I know we went over this quite a bit, but there's a quote that relates to your sudden financial success stemming from your corporate sales job. And you said, "When I got my hands on the gold ring, I didn't want to let it go. I didn't want to give up that treasure. I became greedy. I became overconfident. I knew I was good at what I did. I occupied my time by acquiring more stuff, reaching for toys, trinkets, and hollow trappings. I let myself be dragged down with a life of excess and greed, not only because everyone else was trying to do it and because I could, but because it was fun, easy, and it stroked my ego." Now, my question about that part, because this is the part where you suddenly started making a huge amount of money as a very young man, right?
Yeah, I was making way over 6 figures. Yeah.
And the question is, from your experiences here, this sudden amount of success, the sudden amount of riches, the financial power you had.
Yeah, I think it wasn't the power necessarily. I think, again, I go back to the lack of knowledge. If you, what's the saying about fool me once, shame on me.
Mm-hmm.
Fool me twice. No, actually, fool me once, shame on you.
Shame on you,
fool
yeah.
Me twice, shame on me.
Right.
So I think that's what happened to me. If I knew that this life I was living was going to take me to destruction, or it was going to take me to lose my marriage and end up in all these different tragedies, I wouldn't have done it. But again, sometimes, and that's why the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money itself, but the love of money, because it comes with greed, it comes with all selfishness, pride, all kinds of different things that will take you in the wrong path. And that's what they say, pride comes before the fall. So I think that the problem with me during that time is I needed such a break to make money, because I struggled so much, that when I got that break and I was able to become a professional per se in the banking industry, I didn't know how to handle it the right way. Mm-hmm. And I think that I allowed myself to let my accomplishment get the best of me, not knowing that pride would come with such an effort or compensation financially. Pride would come if I didn't submit it or tamed it, and I just let it. I just let it rise above my humbleness. And I started making money. I bought my wife at the time a new car. I surprised her, for Christmas. And my kids had everything. They were young. I had a brand new house that I built from scratch. I had a Mercedes Benz. I felt like I was on top of the world because I never experienced that before. Remember, I've been an undocumented immigrant for 21 years or 20, plus years. So I never had I never lived a normal American life. Let's put it that way. I didn't have a remote control to open a car of my garage, or, I had a car that I could push start button. Everything was always a struggle. Everything was always, we got to set up for this because we're not legal in this country. We can't do certain things. We got to be careful. So we have this really dark cloud over us. There was always fear about what the next thing you could do. Be careful, be careful, be careful. So when I finally got this job, I felt for the first time like I was an actual citizen. Okay, right. I got a job. I got a stable job. I can support my family. I do pay taxes. I'm a W-2 employee. I make money. I got a credit card. I felt normal for the first time, and I don't think I knew how to handle that.
Gotcha. And talking to you here, and also in doing the research and preparing for this interview, I'm not a Bible scholar, and but when I was researching some of the themes that kept coming up again and again in your book, I was reminded of the tale of King Solomon. And it seems like in your life, there are many parallels to you and this ancient figure. And I want to quote, there's a Bible quote that I pulled up from the research, Deuteronomy 17, verses 16 to 17. A king is commanded not to multiply horses or wives, neither greatly multiply to himself gold or silver. And as we know in Kings, King Solomon violated all three of these, and there were pretty heavy consequences before there was, a path to redemption, right?
Yeah.
And again, reading through your story, man, I saw I was like, am I reading some kind of like modern King Solomon here? Because, I mean, in a way, you were the king in your story, in your life. You were a king, the king, right? And from Deuteronomy, a king is commanded not to multiply horses or wives. I mean, you had the white mint Mitsubishi 3000 GT, which as if people read your book or listen to the audiobook, that Mitsubishi was involved in quite a few interesting stories, including a high-speed race. Yeah. And there were some parts in the book where you were involved in the clubs and the bars, and with that lifestyle, you had a lot of hot chicks around you and on your arms at all times. And neither greatly multiplied to himself gold or silver. I mean, as a corporate salesman, you had immense success, and your gold and silver was multiplying very quickly in a very short period of time.
I did. I was very good, and I'm very proud of that season in my life because I learned that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to do. I remember, one incident at work where my boss, it was almost the end of the shift, and it was close to 7:00. And he said to me, man, I need to get a couple applications in, C-Ray. And I remember that everyone was, because we work for a big banking corporation, and we call the credit card department, not credit card department, the credit card holders, to try to upsell them on a home equity loan. And he says, man, I need to get a couple applications in, C-Ray. And I remember I was just kind of chilling, and I said, how many do you need? And all these guys that work with me, they were also dialing and whatnot. And he goes, how many do you need? He goes, so give me 3 or more. And I said, okay, I'll give you 3 right now. And then I got on the phone, and I got 3 within about maybe 10 minutes. And so what that taught me, not only that I was talented, but also taught me that when you speak things into existence, that's why sometimes people speak certain negative things into existence without knowing that they can become reality. That's why I'm really hesitant to say anything outspoken that I don't really mean. You'll never hear me say anything negative at all. You'll never hear me say I'm sick. I feel like, I'm just a positive person, and I don't say negative things. I don't speak negative things, and I'll try to, obviously, for the most part. But then I spoke that I was going to get those. And I remember when I got him, I said to myself, wow, either they were set up for me already like that, I got lucky, or I'm just good. And I came to the realization that determination is also a part of mindset, determination to accomplish something, and the effort that you put into it. I mean, you're going to have good results. And I remember that all my efforts got me to be the number one in the region, number one in the district, number one in the region, and number two in the country.
I close my eyes and sleep. Got another shuffle to my head. Tomorrow I'll reveal. Tomorrow I'll reveal a new card to play.
All right, folks, we are back with C-Ray Stanziola. This is going to be part 2 of the interview with Mr. Stanziola regarding his new book, Life of an Immigrant. So, C-Ray, at the end of part 1, we were just finishing talking about some quotes and some passages that I highlighted that I thought were quite powerful. And the final quote that I highlighted was from chapter 7, Finding Christ. Now, you already discussed previously that, you've been through so much, and you, through determination, strength, faith, and more, were able to not only adapt, but overcome and actually improve and evolve as a person. And you have a quote here, though, and I quote, you said, "People are drawn to my vibration when things are going well, and they see me as an important person. But when I need help or decide to make some change they don't understand or agree with, suddenly I'm not cool anymore. I have learned to choose my friends wisely. I have learned that sometimes it's better to be alone than to be in bad company." So can you talk a little bit about that part, that point in your life, and what generated that quote?
Yeah. So remember when I shared with you about Catherine and me realizing that I didn't know what real love was when she asked me those tough questions and I couldn't answer them. Remember that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that kind of woke up in me the need of learning what real love was and practice what real love was. Because that's the thing. We can learn, we have knowledge of something, but if we don't put it into practice, it doesn't matter, right? So it's the same thing that happened with me in regards to my friends. I noticed that when I was hanging around the club scene, and I was one of the promoters, and I knew a lot of people, and I get people to, go in the club, skip the line, don't have to pay a cover. I've got a VIP table waiting, whether they earned it or not. I just wanted to be cool, getting some shots, and everybody's all happy, and I'm the cool guy. And my phone they're blowing my phone up every day to just know where the next spot's gonna be. But when I decided to change my life and look to a brighter future and leave that past life, of partying and all that, now the people that hung out with me, that call me on a daily, didn't call me anymore. Or if I called them, they wouldn't answer or they wouldn't be there. So then I learned that, and it's just nature on people that take advantage. Some do it purposely, some just do it because they do it. But net, in your own circle of people, because remember, I mentioned this earlier, that you become what you're influenced by. Whether parents, I talked about the influence of the parents and the children. So believe it or not, that's why modeling and not modeling, but that's why fashion trends happen so often. Someone came out with something and then he stuck with it and people want to follow it. And that's why fashion trends began. It's the same thing here. I just realized that the people that were around me, if they're not making me a better person, if they're not making me grow, then I don't really need them. And it has nothing to do with they're not being nice or cool. It's just, iron sharpens iron. And I decided that I had to be more careful how I chose friends, because I was hurt before. And I'm not anymore an emotional person that moves by emotion, but at the time I got close to certain people, and then suddenly I heard them say a few things, or they wouldn't be there for me. And then I realized that it's very difficult to call anyone just friend. So that's why I don't use the word love so easily or so lightly. I really take that serious. When you say I love someone, people say I love my car, I love my pet, I love everything. They love it. That's a very powerful word. And I think that's the reason why people sometimes confuse real love with just whatever they love. I mean, real love is sacrifice all around. And when you love somebody and you're not willing to sacrifice, then you really don't love them. It's as simple as that. So it's the same thing with friends. Not everybody that tells you, man, you're my friend, means they're your friend, because I think they also don't understand the meaning of real friend. Your real friend means I'll tell you the truth even if it hurts.
Right.
I'll tell you things you don't want to hear because I care. And so that's why I decided to be very, very selective on the kind of friends. And that's why I wrote that quote that I'd rather be alone. I've learned how to be alone, accept myself for that, though I love mingling with people. And if I have to be alone, I'm okay with it. And I had to learn how to do that because I was very codependent and I needed people around me. And that's when I realized I need to be more careful how I choose my friends. And, you know, I can count them with one hand, to be quite honest. That's why I wrote that quote.
Gotcha. Now, if you had to wrap up our section about the book, if you had a favorite part of the book that is your personal favorite, which part would it be? Which moment would it be?
I have to say, without a doubt, because from, you know, for the listeners in my book, there's miracle happening. There's accidents, car accidents happening. There's immigration situations and getting caught by immigration. There is love. There's an affair that's sort of like an invasion, like a war. I mean, there's a little bit of everything, I think, you know. But one of my favorites, and I think one of the most meaningful to me, because I really believe that was a miracle, was when I got ratted out and I got caught by ICE. That was probably, emotionally speaking, the biggest impact in my whole life. Was the day that these ICE agents got me, and I felt like my world had just ended there, because all these thoughts of they're going to take me away from my children, they're going to bust my family, they're going to, because of me, they're going to deport everybody. What am I going to do? I left the country that so long ago, I don't even know anything. I mean, there was just 1,000 things going on as I was being driven in handcuffs to the federal building. So for me, that experience will always be the one that meant the most and that had the most purpose. Because with all the reasons that they had to deport me, they didn't. And I won this case, and I give all the credit to God for giving me another chance to stay in this country. And that's why I believe I'm a man of purpose.
Great. And C-Ray, what is the main message that you'd like people to take away from reading your book or listening to your audiobook? What is the main message here to both immigrants and non-immigrants? So in other words, in general, to people who, you know, want to hear your story and want to take something away, something constructive, to learn something, what is your main message you'd like people to receive from your story?
And that's a great question. And you know what? It's kind of interesting, because normally with people that have books and they have a lot of things going on for them, everyone wants to motivate someone else. Someone wants to encourage someone else that you will fight through it, learn, read books, educate yourself, do this, do that. And you will. But very little people give God the credit for everything you want to accomplish in life. And I think the message I want to give across to everyone is that you can be smart. There's a lot of intellectually smart people. There's a lot of professionals out there. There's a lot of talented, skilled people out there. They can accomplish anything they want. But at the end, it boils down to who you want to give the credit to. And I have to say that I don't see myself any different than a lot of different success stories of people like Tony Robbins and Dave Ramsey and Grant Cardone or you know, many, like, you know, Magic Johnson, whatever, Michael Jordan. I don't see me any different than them, even though they're very successful people. I mean, I think we all have a past, and you got to know the history behind the story. And everyone will have some kind of tribulation, struggle that made them who they are today. And obviously they conquered and won because they fought through it. And that's a lot had to do with their drive and their purpose in life. But what most people don't do when they reach to success is to give God the glory and everything, our creator. And I think that that's one of the things that I want to leave in this message, because my book talks a lot about my conversion and my belief in God and my faith. And a lot of the things that happened to me they had some tragic moments were because of my disobedience or my rebelliousness that don't wanted to do it my way. But the moment I surrender all and I started really thinking about what the Bible tells me, how I got to do things, then I started realizing that it really meant more for me, even though the results could be the same as someone who doesn't use faith like I do. But at the end, I care more about where my soul will go. And the Bible says, what good is it for a man to win the whole world and lose his soul? And I think I've been thinking about my soul destination more than my monetary gains with my talents, because at the end, when this is all said and done, where are we going to go? Have we ever asked ourselves that? I mean, have we ever asked ourselves what's going to happen at the end when this road ends? Whether it's early, like it ended for my ex-wife, Catherine, at 41 years of age. We never thought that was going to happen. Or whether it's going to be 90, 80, 100 years old. The bottom line is, I think that we don't think deep enough about what is eternal life or what happens after death. And that's one of the main reasons that my book has a lot of my faith in it, because I felt that my purpose in life was meaningful. And I discovered truly my gifts when I gave God all the glory and the honor for what he's done for me. Because these gifts that I have had to have come from somewhere. And I think that that's the message I want to bring across is, when you reach success, or even when you're struggling, know that God is there even in the good times and the bad times. And that's the only true friend that never leaves you no matter what condition you're in. I can tell you a handful of people that were there when I had good times, and they're not anymore. And I can tell you people that were there when I was in bad times, and they're not anymore. So, but I know one that stands tall, and it's in every situation, and it's God. And I love the Lord for that. And I thank Jesus for saving my soul, and I give him all the glory. And I'm not trying to get spiritual or religious on anybody, but I just really think that if we thought about our destiny, spiritually speaking, more as opposed to our destiny on this earth and what we can accomplish, then you can win all around, because there is life after death. And I don't think we think about it too much. And, it's funny because, public speakers and motivational speakers talk about tithing and giving to the poor and the needy and all of that, but that's all biblical. Right. They just don't give the credit to God, but that's all biblical, because tithing was a term that God created, that the 10% of your income, your earnings, and that's the way that you honor God and you obey God. I mean, the tithing is a biblical principle, whether you give God, the credit or not. If you talk about karma, karma is a bitch, excuse my French, but, the Bible talks about whatever you sow, that you shall reap. But the world calls it karma. Well, the Bible calls it whatever you sow, that you shall reap. But people don't give credit to the Bible and all these positive quotes that go around. And I just want to let everyone know that God is the center of everything, whether you want to accept it or not, whether you believe it or not. And so I just want to, that's my message, that give God the credit and learn a little bit more about your spiritual life and what happens after death. Because I believe wholeheartedly that everything I went through had a divine purpose, because there's no way, physically speaking, that having 4 car accidents in 1 year, going over 90 miles an hour with not one scratch, or getting caught after 21 years of being illegal in this country with fake documents, or even going through the death of my ex-wife, then we never thought that I would end up telling my daughters that I'm going to be a father and a mother at the same time now, because their mom is gone. Like all these things, coming to this country, not knowing how to speak English, being bullied and made fun of, like all those things, I don't think they happen just to happen. And so I can just tell you, I'm tough. No, I think they happen because there was a purpose in my life, and I think God was driving that purpose, and he was taking me for me to acknowledge that that's why I'm who I am today.
And I wanted to add, too, you mentioned of the 4 car accidents. As I recall from your book, driving your various vehicles, but I remember the Mitsubishi as well. In these accidents, no one was killed and no one was seriously hurt. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah, and right. most of them were me. Just like one of them was me going 90 miles an hour down 410 in San Antonio, and I lost control of my vehicle because someone cut me off. And if I brake, I was going to ram them or hit them in the back. So I swerved, lost control, hit a ditch, flipped the car, over. And then I ended up, on the side. I didn't hit anybody. This is crazy though, because it was 6 o'clock, kind of rush hour. Same thing when I was driving and I fell asleep and I hit a curb, and then I turned my car, swerved, hit the boulevard in the middle of the road, and then went airborne, hit 2 trees and landed sideways, and the car was about to explode. I mean, I was going 91 miles an hour, lost control. My 3000 GT caused a 7-car collision. 1 car was flipped over, but no one died or anything or seriously injured. So yeah, I believe God was in it. I believe that the angels protected me because I have a purpose, and that's the reason why I'm so motivated to stand tall and start sharing my story with people, because I believe people will relate. And the message is God is in everything you do in life, whether you give him credit or not.
Well, and again, going through your story, there are just so many circumstances and incidents where, I mean, if just the chances of you dying or the chances of you getting seriously hurt and incapacitated, or the chances of your life in America being finished because of deportation. I mean, there were so many moments and opportunities for you to really get screwed. No, I'm serious. I mean, you could have been screwed, or you could have just been dead and killed.
Absolutely.
And
not only that,
somehow you always got out of it.
Not only that, Seth, I mean, I didn't talk about the fact that, when I burned my hand, almost 3rd-degree burn, and I almost lost my hand. I didn't talk about that I had epilepsy, and I almost died of epilepsy. I mean, and the Lord healed me from it. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely 100%. I've probably had more things happen to me in one's life that I couldn't anymore think that it was luck, but I had to believe there was a divine purpose. And that's why I strongly believe that I have divine purpose on this earth. And God allowed me to have adopted children, become a parent to my biological children, and a mother and a father for them now, be able to help, and my parents look up to me and tell me that they know I'm their hope, and they're really proud of me, and I'm excited to know my parents. They know that I will always be here to take care of them, and that's the purpose why I'm working so hard for. And I think being grateful and acknowledging God in all things is what really gets you to learn and understand what your real divine purpose is.
And not to get too mystical on the audience here, but there is a story in your book that I've noted, which was kind of, when I was reading it, it was quite strange. Because again, it referred back to you having so many quote unquote coincidences. And, by the time I finished the book, I was like, there was no way this man was that lucky. There's no way that this man had this many coincidences in a short period of time. Your early, your 20s and your 30s. And there was one story that came out to me that could have been, out of a fantasy book. It could have been out of a supernatural book, but it happened. And as you reported, you ran out of gas, and you had to pull over your car, right, to a gas station.
Oh yeah,
and you didn't have any, right? And you remember this one? You didn't have any money, and you said a prayer in your car before pulling up to the station, asking God for help, putting yourself out there. And you tried to pay for some gas with your credit card. It was declined. So you really were stuck. You were not only stuck, you were broke at the time. Yeah. And, even I could not imagine what was going through your head, but maybe you were thinking, well, I'm screwed. And suddenly there is a guy that, as you wrote, there's a man who comes out of nowhere with a gray beard and gray hair. And he comes up to you and says, I'd like to pay for your gas, right? So he goes ahead, he pays your gas, you fill up the tank, and while when you're finished filling up, you put the nozzle back on the receptacle, and you turn around to thank this man, and you couldn't find him. He just disappeared.
Yeah. He was, and I'll tell you what, I'm pretty quick on my feet, man. And I was very, I don't want to say to an extent, a little embarrassed, because he came out of nowhere. I didn't even see him get out of a car. He just walked towards me and offered to do that. And I'm like, okay. I go, really? And he goes, yeah. Then I said, you sure? He goes, yeah. And of course I wasn't going to say no, because I knew I needed it. But one thing
but at the same time, you're thinking, okay, what is this guy trying to sell me?
Well, yeah, because how many people come to you like random and just tell you, let me give you, here's $100. Why? No, just cause. Obviously you're gonna think, because that's the part of the physical. that's the part of the, you're like, think, okay, well, the logical part is, why is this guy giving me gas money or wanting to pump gas in my car, even though I need it? But I want to say something prior to when you said, maybe I thought, I'm screwed now. Actually, I didn't think that. And I think it had a lot to do with my faith. Faith, really, what it does for you, it allows you to believe something you haven't seen yet, as if it were already happened. And so I believed, because of my convictions, because the way I walked my life, because the way I carry myself, because I knew my relationship with God, and that I solely trusted that he will always be there for me. Because there is a promise in the Bible that says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And so I stood by that promise, because if God wasn't a man of promise, then he'd be a liar. And I know he hasn't lied to me yet. So I stood tall and said, okay, the Bible says that you'll never leave me nor forsake me. So I'm in need now, but I've actually sowed seeds. I've helped others in the past. I know, Lord, you're not going to leave me here. Of course, at that very moment, even if I didn't have anyone come and pay for my gas, I wouldn't have doubted God. I still would have believed, even if I had to walk somewhere, or even I had to call somebody, whatever I had to do, I would have done without doubting God anyways. But he showed me, I believe, through my faith, and that I wasn't shooken by this difficult moment, but I still believe that he can come through one way or the other. So when I got out of the car and I wanted to put gas, I wasn't thinking that I didn't have money. I thought I had some money in my card, but when the card declined, that's when I was like, oh, and I started thinking, okay, who am I going to call? What am I going to do? So I didn't panic. I didn't think I was screwed. I didn't panic. I kept it very calm and collected. And I just said, okay, well, Lord, okay, help me figure this out. What am I going to do? And so at that very moment, he comes and approaches me and offers to do that as I was trying to figure it out. Now, what could have happened was no one came. I was stranded there. I had to call somebody, and eventually someone would have came, and I still would have given God the credit, and I still would have believed that God brought someone to help me. I don't believe at all that I would have been left there stranded at all. I believe that something would have happened, because that's just my faith. And I think that's what triggered whatever miracle happened. Now, of course, me knowing the spiritual realm, or understanding it a little bit, I realized that was an angel. That was a miracle. That was God bringing his provision to me because of my faithfulness to him. And his faithfulness to me. Because, God is faithful even when we're unfaithful to him. So that was just one way of God showing me he's real. Now, It could happen. There's people that have other examples, right? One guy that was going to get shot, and suddenly the gun didn't go off. And they tried to do it again, and it didn't go off. And then they walked away and left him by himself. And then his life was spared. Well, yeah, that guy said, okay, God gave me 2 chances. I could have died, and I didn't. So it's just how you see it. But I believe that things just don't happen just to happen. And so the problem with people when they have incidents like mine is that they don't realize that that is a sign of God calling you to pay attention, because he wants to do something special in your life, and he has something special for you, and you have to pay attention. And that's kind of like how God gives you a little bit of a hint. Hey, man, hey, listen, I'm right here. I'm right here. But then some people, they're not spiritually driven, won't see it as God calling your attention. They'll see it as, I'm lucky, or how fortunate I am, or my goodness, thank goodness, or whatever else. I just choose to believe that God is involved in everything that happens to me, whether it's good or bad. And what I mean bad is, if something goes wrong, like a tragedy, like Kathy passing away, me having to be a father and a mother, to me, though that's a terrible situation, my daughters are struggling with their moms that it's absent now and whatnot. I still believe that there was a purpose behind that. Why? Because he brought unity to the family. My whole family got together. We came in and became more closer than we've ever been before, me and my brother as well. So even though there is a tragedy in the family, I believe that God can turn it around for the good, if you believe that. And the Bible also talks about it in Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. So I know that no matter how difficult things, because being a Christian or being a believer doesn't mean that nothing is going to go wrong. That doesn't mean that. It means that you believe and you have the hopes they lay in the faith you have in God. And that's all there is to it. But life's still difficult. Life still has struggles, and you just handle them different. And that's one of the things that I learned. And that's why my message in this book is, also give God credit he deserves regardless, because he is the one that at the end is moving things behind the scenes.
Right. Got it. So we talked about Life of an Immigrant, your book, which thoroughly goes into your past and your journey and your story from, General Noriega's Panama through the invasion, which once again, the invasion triggering, which is usually a negative thing, was a trigger to eventually create a positive thing, at least for yourself and your family. And your book documents that journey that began in Panama, then ended up in America. Let's kind of talk about where that journey ended up in the present day. So these days, as I understand, you are the founder of a business and a movement called I Am Latino, right?
That is correct.
And from your company's website, and I quote, your mission is to create a worldwide platform that promotes the talents and abilities of individuals found within La Cultura Latina, creating ways to unite other cultures to learn to work together in unity, because unity means power. So can you take a moment and talk a little bit about this mission and about what inspired you to create an organization and a movement that had this type of message?
Well, first thing I want to say, I love all colors and I love all people. And I Am Latino was birthed out of an experience with my legal status in this country. So when I was ratted out and I ended up in deportation, I was transferred from San Antonio, Texas, all the way to South Texas, Laredo. And when I was there, I was in a bunk, and I was putting my stuff up in the bunk, and there was this older guy around maybe close to 70, 60, probably 8 or give or take. And he was holding court. He was talking about, he was basically complaining about why he was in there. And I overheard the conversation. Mind you, at this point, I don't have any money in my pocket. They took all my stuff. I couldn't even call to have them bail me out. And my bond was set at like 10 grand. So I ended up listening to this guy's story. And what he was saying was, this situation that happened to me was during the last few months or years before Bush was done with the Bush Junior, before Obama came in power. And so he said he had been in the States. He was from Monterrey, Mexico. I've been in the States for over 30 years. Came to the States in the 70s, lived in San Antonio. And he owned his own business and would commute from Texas to Monterrey often and never had any problems with immigration because he had a green card. But in the 70s, when he was a teenager or a young guy, he got caught with a little bit of marijuana. Mm-hmm. At that time, it was a misdemeanor. So it wasn't a really big deal. But, years went by, and then 30 years later, I guess the laws changed. And so when he was coming back to the U.S. from Mexico, he got stopped, and they found that misdemeanor in his record that had never really been disclosed to the federal system. So they put him in jail for that and gave him no bond. So he was complaining to the rest of the people, saying, I can't believe this government allowed me I've been in this country for 30 plus years. I don't even have driving tickets. And for something I did back in the 70s, they got me stuck here with no bond to get out, no one running my business. Like, they don't think I'm a professional, that I also have people that I'm supporting and blah, blah, blah. And he was saying all that. And I heard that. And then I prayed and I said, Lord, give me an opportunity to get out of here and do something that we can show America, the world, that Latinos are also professionals, but we are also educated people, that we also can handle our own. And then I bonded out, paid the $10,000, and I had been working for a magazine, a Latino magazine back from California, but they weren't compensating me, and I was really frustrated. I talked to a buddy of mine who at the time was my mentor, Clark Ortiz, and he says, come to Dallas. And I went to Dallas. I used to live in South Lake, Dallas. I went to South Lake, took me out to eat. I shared with him my frustrations, and I told him that, these guys are not paying me. And he goes, well, why don't you start your own magazine? And I said, me? Oh, man, come on, man, not me. And he goes, yeah, you. And if you do, I'll support you. And then I went back home, thought about a name, came up with I Am Latino back in 2013, January 11th, registered the LLC, and started pushing I Am Latino. as a platform to help Latinos tell their story and how they became who they became and why. Because it's important people to know the history behind the story. Not every success story, you know the history behind it, and it's important because it could help you. And so, and that's how I Am Latino started, because of that experience when I was in Laredo in immigration jail.
Right. Wow. So it started in jail. this
Yeah.
brilliant idea. It was
Yeah.
born it was born in Laredo prison, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Well, again, I like this theme going through your book and indeed your life story. You know, again, I mentioned the invasion of Panama, which triggered your immigration that ended up in a wildly successful story in America. You know, it's just the theme comes up again and again in your story that there's some negative thing that happens, some kind of tragedy or challenge, and somehow you found a way and you've showed people in your book how you could turn these lemons into true lemonade. It's incredible.
Well, you know, it boils down to some things that happened in my life. I brought them upon myself for the choices I made. Some, I don't even know why they showed up, but they showed up. And the other ones, I believe, circumstantial, you know, maybe at the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever the case may be. But I've always had one thing in mind. I'm the only person who can find a way out. No one else is going to find it for me. So I just think that I it's a lot to do with character. You know, I think that inside of me, I have a winner's, you know, attitude, and I want to fight until the end. And it really, not everybody has it. I mean, I've heard a lot of really, really compelling stories, man. I heard a story about someone from Vietnam that were trying to leave in a boat and they got shot and one of the sisters died and they had to swim, you know, ashore and sharks and I mean, all kinds of stuff. Everyone has a story. We all have a story. And the message, besides giving God the credit for everything that's happened in my life, the message too is tell your story, because there's going to be someone out there that you're going to be able to bless with your story. And that's what they are. The wisdom comes from experiencing things in life, and those are to share. That's why I want to share my stories, even though some I didn't share this time around. I will next time around. I got a couple of more stories that I want to share in the near future that are very much dramatic, and they're stories that I got to be real careful how I share them, but they will impact people and somebody's going to relate to them. And I think that it's important that people understand that your stories, your life is to be shared because someone else could be blessed with your story. And, you know, going from prison and being illegal for so long and all the things that we mentioned already, all I knew was to fight and fight back and learn along the way. So the only time you really, really lose is when you quit. But if you don't quit, it's just a learning experience to make you better. And that's why I'm very grateful for all the things that happened to me in the past, for all the people that talked about me, for all the things that were so difficult to overcome, because at some point I had to use my intelligence, my spirituality, my mind, my everything to figure it out. And it's what made me who I am today. That's why I'm how I am. And my only purpose in this life is to help others as much as I can, because I'm not money driven, though we need it. I'm purpose driven. And that's what I want to teach everyone. Learn what your purpose in life is, and then you'll see how you can bless others.
Fantastic. That's great advice. And looking at the I Am Latino website, there appears to be an issue of the magazine, and as I can see, there are some beautiful Latina woman in a dress, climbing out of a very cool car. Is that a Ferrari or something, or a Lamborghini?
That's a Viper.
It's a Viper. It's a Dodge Viper V10. All right.
Yeah.
So it appears that your magazine can be purchased, and it's a digital magazine. And do you also have like a print copy that you distribute? Or
we do have we have print copies as well, but they're free. People can actually go to issue.com and then they can actually view the magazine, online, and basically read every article. We've got from Congress people to very entrepreneur stories. We even have Eva Longoria's nonprofit in one of our magazines. And, I mean, we're just basically trying to make a difference in our, Latino culture. And it's amazing because, Latinos are the culture that has every color. And it's very interesting because we got from, redheaded people to, dark complected black, light complected blonde, blue eyes, and they speak all Spanish. So we got all kinds of colors in Latinos. And so it's interesting because I Am Latino is not only for Latinos, but we've had a great success with all kinds of people from Anglos to African Americans. They support this movement and we all in unity just come together. And I love the fact that I Am Latino has brought other ethnicities together, not just Latinos. And I think it's a great project. I'm very excited to be leading it. And I hope that it grows to be something that will make a difference in people's lives for the better. Because like I said, I just want to bless someone. I just want to help somebody. I would just put my little grain of salt in this world. I'm not where I want to be for sure. I'm not where I used to be. And I'm just very grateful for every phase of my life, every little thing. I'm very, very grateful.
Right. And, looking over your organization and your magazine and your media, I totally respect the mission here. And I think that, not only as Americans, but just as humans, it's important to have that positive message of unity and seeking out what makes us more similar and alike and respecting that and learning about each other. I think these days, it's that kind of positive, uplifting message is even more critical these days when, these are tough times on a variety of levels. And, 2020 has been very challenging for many people, and not only in the United States, as across the world. There's been economic problems, financial problems, political problems, social problems. So I really like the message and the mission behind I Am Latino.
You're right. I thought that 2020 was going to be a year where everything was going to be pretty. I didn't see this coming. I don't think any of us saw it coming. And all these racial issues going on right now, all this pandemic, social distancing stuff, we've never experienced this before. It caught everyone by surprise. And I'll tell you one thing, man. I'm just glad that I have a movement that includes everybody, doesn't exclude anybody. Talent has no color, one of our slogans. And I'm just really excited to know that even though we've encountered in 2020 some difficult moments, I also want to squeeze as much lemon out of those lemons as I can to make a good lemonade. And getting quarantined and being with family was such a good thing. Well, people were complaining. I was just thanking God that I didn't have to be everywhere, busy all the time, and I giving my loved ones the undivided attention they really needed. And it was so good to know how important and how much they need us. We get so busy, so wrapped up with what we need to do to make ends meet that we forget that we're raising people that need you. And then we only become a provider as opposed to a parent. And I got an awareness of that when I was quarantined. And that's why I decided to go from California back to Texas with my daughters, because I realized, man, why would I spend this quarantine time without my children? And mind you, I'm doing business. I'm in California doing business, but it was just such a good thing, quarantine. I know that a lot of businesses were affected. So was mine. So was everybody's. But it was such a good opportunity and a wake-up call to realize how important it is to divide and order your life properly and divide your time properly. When you come home, take your hat off of businessman, leave it outside, and come in here and be a parent, be a husband, be a wife, as opposed to come back and get on the computer, start working, and then rob the time that your family needs. And one thing we can never get back is time. Once he's gone, he's gone. So, I mean, when I look, now my son is 23 in the Marines, and he was 5 years old a couple years back. So that's one of the things that we have to realize. Time won't come back, and you got to make the best of it. So you got to organize your life, make sure that you spend the right time with the right people and the right things, because when he's gone, he'll never come back.
Perfect. So, C-Ray, let's talk a little bit about the future to bring our interview to a close. My question for you is, for this year, what are you most looking forward to in the future? Either personally or professionally, or even both. So beyond I Am Latino and beyond the distribution and promotion of your new book, which is again, Life of an Immigrant. What else are you looking forward to this year? Do you have any other irons in the fire, so to say, regarding business or personal plans?
Well, yeah, actually, we're working now on the company level. We're working on building the TV network, which is I'm very passionate about television and entertainment, and I love to produce content.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do is produce content. I love to do it and get that stable and back up and running. And also, one of the personal projects for the branding of my name and my book and all that stuff. I am going to be writing a few more books, but I love to do professional speaking and encourage people and travel doing motivational speaking or professional speaking. And that's one of the things that we're going to be working in the near future. Also, one of my final destinations, which I think is where I'd like to end up at, is I like to build and create my own studio and my own label.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a musician. I play several instruments, and I love music. And music is my passion. And I think I do okay for as a musician. And I love to produce and build talent and make my music and lay my thoughts and my ideas on a keyboard or on a guitar. So that's probably what I want to do as a final destination, is just do my music and promote my music and things like that. But yeah. And of course, my main goal is to take care of my folks, because they're the ones who got me here, you know. For every listener out there, just know that honor your parents, because regardless of how they can be, sometimes we also have to be thankful that they gave us life and we have an opportunity to make it better than they did on this earth. But we should be grateful no matter what. So, and that's pretty much it, my man.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. This has been C-Ray Stanziola, who is the author of Life of an Immigrant, The Journey to America for C-Ray Stanziola. And the book is newly released and is available on Amazon.com. And also, there's an audiobook version that we produced here at KASMA Records, and you can get that at Audible. And also on the KASMA Records YouTube channel, you can also listen to a free sample of the book. So again, if you liked this content, please feel free to like and subscribe. And again, I would like to thank our esteemed guest, C-Ray Stanziola. C-Ray, thank you so much for your time.
Well, the pleasure was mine. I'm very excited and I appreciate you having me on your show. And I hope that this message will bless somebody, some of the listeners out there. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
All right. Take care.
All right.